winter times is mostly one of my most favorite times of the entire year. One of the major reasons is that I have the excuse to sit at home, cozy up in my blankets and read as much as I want to read. I choose to read atmospheric books, I choose to read cozy books, some thrillers, some fantasy. While it's gloomy outside, let it all build up in my head, all of that imagination, with my cozy little drink and my cozy little clothes, pulling the sleeves of my clothes like this. It's all just so good. I want to share this experience with you guys because it is so good. I think you should give this at least one shot, which is why in today's video I'm going to be recommending you tons of books that you can read in the winter season. And even if winter is not your favorite time and you get very gloomy and dark, use these books as escapism. Why not? I mean, don't actually escape from your real problems, you do have to face them. I'm blabbering at this point, just have fun with these, okay? Hey you guys, welcome back to the channel. I hope you're doing very nice. I'm sending a lot of hugs and positivity to all of you. Hi, if you're new, welcome to the channel. I really hope you enjoy the content. If you do, please do consider subscribing. Please do like, because that's how YouTube knows that you like my video. I have romance, thrillers, literary, historical fiction, fantasy series, all sorts of books in here. And I'm also going to be sharing my winter TBR with you guys. I actually thought of making two separate videos for this. Actually, I thought of like not making this video at all because so many of these recommendations are going to be repetitive if you are a regular viewer. But I did see some comments from you guys asking me for winter recommendations, and that was all the ammunition I need to tell all of my shitty thoughts to go to hell and just make this video, you know. But I did combine both the ideas, which is my recommendations plus my TBR. So this is sort of like the ultimate winter book video, so that even if you're a regular viewer and you get bored with the recommendations, you can skip to the TBR part. I'm gonna be putting timestamps so you don't get bored. Before we start, I don't know if you have seen the elephant in the room, but I like to buy one sweatshirt every season. It is sort of like my sweatshirt or my hoodie for the season, for that season. I have one pink hoodie that I wear all the time, that I wore so many times last year, and before then I had a black Nirvana hoodie. The OGs will know what I'm talking about. This year it's this one. Why? Because it has Hogwarts written on it, and then it has the crest down there. I am in love with this sweatshirt. It has this fuzzy cozy feeling to it, but it's also not very heavy. I love the inner soft lining of it because I don't like clothes that poke at my skin. I got it in 2XL, so it's very oversized and very comfy, and I got it from Red Wolf. Red Wolf has a wide collection of so many bookish merch, but also anime merch if you're into that, and I can attest for the quality because this is literally like being wrapped in a blanket at all times. Plus I do have another t-shirt by them, which is an on-demand print t-shirt. My weekend is booked, and you know what, today is the weekend, and that is what I'm going to throw on once I am done showering. I got that also in XL, and it is huge, it is comfy. That is my personal preference, to get my clothes in bigger sizes. You can get your own size, and I love the print, I love the quality, I love the coloring of the t-shirt. Can't actually wait to get so many more clothes from them because I love their prints and I love their quality and I love their sizing. What else do you need? If you want to get this Hogwarts sweatshirt, or you want to get any other clothes from their awesome collection from their website, I'm going to put a link in the description. You can go and check it out. Go ahead, shop, romanticize your winter by wearing the Hogwarts crest on your body. I am literally obsessed with this sweatshirt. You will see me wearing this in like 2000 vlogs, and even when I am vlogging like on different days, I keep wearing this. So it's like I'm literally wearing this even if I'm shooting on different days. I'm going to start with thrillers because that is yours and mine favorite genre to read. I am always reaching out for a thriller whenever I'm confused because I know that it's going to be fast paced, it's going to be easy to read, I'm going to get through it, and sometimes it hits so well. First book is The Reappearance of Rachel Price by Holly Jackson. This is the story of Belle, who is 18 years old now, but she lost her mother when she was 2 years old, and that entire case was so interesting that some people have decided to make a documentary out of it, and now everything is being rehashed from Belle's past, only for Belle's mother, Rachel Price, to come back, to reappear. It's a standalone, and it is thick enough so you feel like you're reading like this really big book, but it's also thin enough so you don't feel like, oh my god, how much I want to read this book. The reason it becomes a winter read for me is because of the pacing of the book. It is quite slow and the mystery is brewing a little bit. A lot of the settings also will be so much fun to read in the winter gloomy time. It's a YA thriller, so you can read it even if you are a teenager. Do see the trigger warnings one, and you can read it even if you're a beginner. Next Next up, we have a cozy thriller, because cozy thrillers in winter time is peak awesomeness. You get the gruesome, fast-paced part of thrillers and you get the cozy vibes of winter. The book I have for you is Finlay Donovan is Killing It by El Cosimano. This is actually a series, so if you read this book and you get invested in the characters, you have an entire series to go through. You don't have to, you can read it as a standalone. It's a story of this single mother who is trying to balance her life, and she's also a crime thriller writer, and she's narrating her plot to her agent when somebody who's sitting beside her decides that she's a hit woman and she hires her to kill her husband. You get attached to the characters. Finlay Donovan is in the title for a reason, because Finlay Donovan is such an interesting character. You root for her even if she's doing some wrong things here and there. There are so many gruesome parts too, don't get me wrong, but it's all done and wrapped up in a very cozy manner. Great for beginners, and if you're like 15, 16 plus, you can go ahead and read this one. I am not sure if I read it in winters or if this book just gives me the winter vibes only and only because of the darkness. All I can imagine is that there is a certain eeriness and chill and darkness in winter time, especially at night time. It's so different from summer nights. This book, whether I read it in winters or in summers, gave me that chill vibe, that eerie vibe that I have never let go of. It is an insanely dark book, not meant for beginners and not meant for teenagers. I mean, you can read it as a beginner if you want to, but it's very slow paced for you. However, if you're looking for something plain sinister, then this is the book for you. The book is Sharp Objects by Gillian Flynn, which is also a TV show, I think it's available on Hotstar, and I have watched it, but it was just not as fun as the book. The show is a little too slow for my taste, and yes, the book itself is also very slow paced, but look at that, it's not that thick, and so it whooshes by without you realizing. Also, the mystery is so thick in it that you are glued to the pages to find out what exactly happens. I don't think that you can count this as a thriller because it was just not that fast paced. A journalist goes back to her town to capture and investigate something that happens in her town, but something that has happened now, the murder, is sort of related to something that happened when the journalist used to live in her town. They are somehow interconnected and her past is now being rehashed. Do not pick this book up without reading the trigger warnings. I beg of you, if there is one book you should be reading the trigger warnings for, apart from A Little Life, it's this book. It's intense, it's crazy. If you want darkness, there is no better book. Next up, I have a paranormal recommendation. It's not exactly a horror book, but it's not exactly a thriller book. It's somewhere in the middle. It has the haunting vibes, it's eerie, it gives you chills so many times. I highly recommend, if you want the chilly vibe, to read it at night, like in the darkness. If you have a reading light or something, like create that sort of an atmosphere. It's just not going to be as fun if you're reading it in the daylight, because you're not going to get scared. Nothing is scary in daylight, but this one at nighttime is peak eeriness, and it's such a fun read. You can read it if you're a beginner, you can read it if you are a teenager. And the book is The House Across the Lake by Riley Sager. Riley Sager is sort of like a hit or miss for me. Sometimes I really like his books, sometimes I don't. I have another paranormal recommendation, which was Lock All Doors. I'll put it up on the screen. You can check that out too if you want to, though that was like a 2.5 star read for me, so that's why I'm not recommending it. This one, however, was awesome. It's a story of this woman who is looking at the house across the lake because the people in that house are living her dream life, but as she's witnessing their lives, she also witnesses a lot of things that she shouldn't be witnessing, and it just keeps getting crazier and crazier till the last 100 pages. The mystery is building, a few plot twists thrown here and there, and in the last 100 pages, Riley Sager slaps you with plot twist after plot twist after plot twist. It's literally crazy, and I would give anything to actually read this book for the first time during the winters. I mean, I think the setting is a little bit summery with the lake and these people, I think, spending their summer away, but the vibes are so wintry. Next up is a sci-fi thriller recommendation, which I have no idea why it gives me the winter vibe, but it just does. The book is Dark Matter by Blake Crouch. Now, this is the story of a man who has a very healthy, happy family life, but he always thinks what would happen if he hadn't given up his career, if he went on to become a successful man in his career. When one day he wakes up in that life. Now all he wants is to get back to his fulfilling family, and we see his journey. It's a sci-fi novel that I think if I read it when it came out, it would have been more fun for me. Or if you are completely new to the sci-fi genre, I think you'll enjoy this a lot because the sci-fi part of it is very understandable. If you're an avid sci-fi reader, I don't recommend this book. If you're an avid sci-fi movie watcher also, I don't highly recommend this book because it can be a little too cliche, but in the end, obviously, it's your choice. Give it a shot. It's an interesting read. It's so emotional, and certain scenes from it are still imprinted in my brain. All of the maze and just this cover itself, this man just roaming around, gives me strong winter vibes. Next up, one of the main reasons why I'm recommending this book as a winter recommendation is the freaking cover of it. You look at the cover and you're like, yeah, I want to read this during the winter. It is not a horror novel, but it is equally horrifying. It is not paranormal, but it's just so gruesome that it's horrifying. It is from the horror writer. The book recommendation is Misery by Stephen King. Just look at that cover. What else gives you stronger winter vibes than this? It is a story of an author who has just completed his book after a very, very long time writing a book, and now he wants to celebrate. But when he goes out to celebrate, he gets into an accident only to be saved by a woman who is his biggest fan and is now holding him captive and is forcing him to write a book only for her. It's a very progressive book. It starts out very slow and all nice and cozy, and then it progresses into the most horrifying things that can ever happen to man. If you want to start with Stephen King books but you're like, I'm not a horror reader, I think this can be the perfect start for you because you do get introduced to how Stephen King writes, but this book does not have the jump scare part in it, and it's a very easy to read first book by Stephen King kind of a book. In the end, in this section, we have a proper horror novel. I have sprinkled in a few horror recommendations as much as I could in all of the other books, but this one is a proper horror novel. A couple gets a house at a steal away price and they're like, oh my god, we're so lucky, and they're gonna renovate the house. When the family who used to live in this house and the father who grew up in this house comes back with his family to say, can we just visit this place? I really want to show my kids where I grew up. And our main character hesitates but lets them back in, though she shouldn't have. That was her biggest mistake. Then the story just unravels from there. The recommendation is We Used to Live Here by Marcus Cliver, and this is a recent read for me and I am literally obsessed with it. Once again, read it at night, read it during winters. Oh my god, and I highly recommend the audiobook version of it because I listened to a little bit of the audiobook version after I got done reading it because I just knew that the audiobook version is going to be literally awesome, and it was. I think it's available on Audible if you want to go and check it out. For the major part, it reads like a mystery thriller till the last 100 pages where it becomes like a complete horror novel. It's extremely creepy, it's eerie, airtight, does not waste a lot of your time. The only thing is that it ends in open-ended questions that is left for interpretation. So if you don't like that, I think you will not enjoy that part of the book, but I still tell you, do not let that hold you back from the book. I think you should definitely give it a shot if you can. Now that we're done with all of the thrillers, let's start with a few romance recommendations I have for you guys. First up is one of my most favorite books ever to read in the winter time because I'm obsessed with vampires and I'm obsessed with rom-coms. So if you like rom-coms and you like vampires, you will also be obsessed with this book. It is such a good time. If you get gloomy and dark in your mind during winters, this will be the light that you need, the ray of hope that you need, because it's so fun. The book is My Roommate is a Vampire by Jenna Levine, who has also come out with another vampire book which I cannot wait to get my hands on that and read it. I'm so obsessed. Yet again, another character thinking that she has gotten an apartment to rent at a steal away price, only to find out that her roommate is a vampire. But it's nothing scary, it's nothing spooky, it's all cute and adorable. The vampire is not from our time, so there are so many things that he does not know about in the technology space and so many other spaces. Plus he's a vampire, so he doesn't really know all the needs of a human being, and so he's this adorable little vampire who is not very broody. I mean, he can get broody when he wants to, but he has this golden retriever energy to him that I love. I love vampires and I love golden retriever boys. That is a great combination in this book. It gets a little spicy towards the end of the book, and it's not even like the best spice ever, so I won't recommend it to teenagers. But if you're a beginner in the reading world and you just want plain fun time, then this is the perfect book for you. Another similar vibes book, we have Assistant to the Villain by Hannah Nicole Meyer, which is the story of Evie, who is just wandering over the woods because her life is not going right, everything is going wrong, and she's trying to process everything, and she's in need of money and a job and whatnot, when she meets our villain and she decides to start working with him, and she becomes the assistant to the villain. This one also has dual POV, which just adds to the book so much. It's fun, it's cozy, it has its own dark vibes to it, but in a very cozy way. And this one also does have a sequel, which I think is already out, which is called Apprentice to the Villain. So if you want a paranormal fantasy-ish romance recommendation, then this is a good recommendation for you. It is heavy on the romance, but like not that heavy on the romance. It also does build up a world which is fun to read, so it's a fun read. Next up, if you're a fan of small town romances, then this is the perfect winter read for you, because in this book our main character stumbles upon a small town, which is the small town from her favorite small town romance book, and we get to see what she does after that. So cozy, so wintry. I do wish I read in the winter time. It promises to be a love story, but I wouldn't tell you to go into it thinking that it's a romance novel, though it does have hints of romance in it. But go in for the vibes, go in because you love small town romances and you want to see what you would do if you stumbled upon a small town that is from your favorite small town romance novel. The book is a novel love story by Ashley Poston. It's gorgeous and it looks like such a summery book, but the vibe is so wintry. Great for beginners, but not for teenagers. It's not that graphic, but still. The next one is actually my favorite book from this author, and I have another book that I'm literally obsessed with, but that just gives me strong summer vibes, and so I'm not recommending that book. I mean, literally the name of the main character is Lemon, her pet name, and that is like so summery to me. This one is so wintry, and yet again it's not very heavy on the romance, but the romance of it is so interesting and it's so intimate in a non-physical way, and I love that. And it also gives me strong Just Like Heaven vibes, and Just Like Heaven is my favorite movie, so I had such a fun time reading this one. The book is The Dead Romantics by Ashley Poston. This is the story of Florence, who has gone back to her hometown because something terrible has happened, only to come face to face with the ghost of her editor, and she's like, wait, what's going on? I love Ashley Poston's writing in this. I love this premise so much. As I said, the romance is not very heavy, especially because the man is a ghost for most of the book, but whatever romance is there, it's so emotional and intimate, and I am obsessed with that kind of romance. You can also read it as a teenager if you want to, because it barely has any spice in it, and it's great for beginners. It has those cemetery, dark, wintry vibes. Enjoy it. In the end, in the romance section, yet again, one of the major reasons why I'm recommending this book in the winter recommendation list is because of the freaking cover. Just like Misery, there is no other book that screams winter like this book. Actually, there's no other book that screams fall and autumn like this book, but I just don't think there's fall and autumn in India, so I'm not gonna say that. The book is You Again by Kate Goldbeck, which is one of my most favorite romances that I have read, because it's so fun, it's so intimate, and there's just so much tension built up in the book. I love slow burn, and this does that in a beautiful way. It's a story of these two people who meet at different time intervals of their life, and you see how their relationship grows or diminishes through all of these years. It is sort of played off of Harry Met Sally and Humtum, so if you like those movies, you can give this book a shot. Though I will say, don't expect the book to be like those movies at all. The book is its own thing, and it's very good at that. I think if you compare it to the movies, then you will ruin it. In the end, oh no, this is not the end. Okay, wait. This is going to be a long video, huh? Next up, I am going to recommend you some fantasy books, standalones, and a few series that you can read during the winter time. Winter time is prime time to actually start a series, even if it is long, because you can totally commit to it. At least that's how my brain works. The first standalone book recommendation I have for you is The Night Circus by Erin Morgenstern, which is the story of these two magicians that are competing against each other. The only thing to know is that whoever loses actually dies. They don't just lose the competition, they lose their life. This one is a little bit slow paced and it takes quite some time to build the entire story because there's just so much going on. I only told you one aspect of the story. There's so much more that happens. I remember being like 300 pages into it and I put a story on my Instagram saying, oh my god, like literally it has to start telling me what is going on at this point because I can't take it. And a lot of people will DNF it to that point because it is totally understandable. A book shouldn't take that much time to actually capture your interest in it, but if you are ready to give this book a chance and actually roll over to the other side, it has sort of like that snowball effect because then things starts rolling off the ground and it all makes sense. All of the loopholes are closed and it's a beautiful magical story. I love the vibes and I think it is set in London, and London has this very grey skies, rainy vibes in my mind, and so that seems perfect to read in the winter time. Next up, I'm only going to be recommending you the first book because I have only read the first book, but I do want to read this entire series myself in winter time because it is so good and it has those strong winter vibes, not because it's so cozy but because of how dark it is. It's intense and it's dark, and that intensity and darkness must be felt when it is cold and eerie. The book is The Poppy War by R.F. Kuang, which is the first book, and it also has two other books in the series. It's the story of Rin, who escapes marriage and goes into this academy because she doesn't want to marry and she'll do anything to not get married, only for her story to escalate to war. This one also is a thick one and the other two books are thicker. One way to romanticize your life or romanticize any season is to remember, oh yeah, I read this book during that time. You know, you remember it from the songs you listen to and the books that you read. If you want to remember this winter time and you want to invest yourself in a very dark series, then I think this can be a perfect one. It's high fantasy, it's gruesome. I'm telling you, it's not meant for the weak-hearted, not meant for beginners, and not meant for teenagers at all. Please do read the trigger warnings when you get into it, but once you get over all of those stages, once you do read it, you're going to be obsessed because I was. It's an epic. It doesn't feel like a normal fantasy book. It feels like an epic, and I can't wait to read the other two books. Next up, of course, I read this book during winter time, and so it gives me strong winter times, even though it is sort of set in a desert. In a desert that is just scorching heat, and I totally get it, but for some reason deserts also remind me of killing winter, like killer cold. So I choose to see this one with that killer cold vibe, but a beautiful fantasy romance. It's also YA, so you can read it if you are a teenager, and I have recommended it a million times, so I'm just gonna go past through it. The book is The Wrath and Dawn and Rose and Dagger. If you want to start a series but don't want to commit too much, then I think you can read these books. It does have high stakes, but it's also not that heavy. It's not very intense. It does have war going on here and there, but I did not feel like it's traumatizing. It's a very good time and you get really invested in it. Plus, if you want enemies to lovers, no other book has done it like this one for me, because these two people are supposed to kill each other. The main male character marries one woman every day and kills her the next day. Oh my god, I'm getting reminded of the premise, and it was so good. And the main female character loses her best friend to this man, and so she decides to marry him and volunteers so she can kill him. Read this, you guys. So good. I don't want to hype it up too much is the thing. That's why I really try to mellow down my reaction to it, because I don't want to hype it up. You know, I don't want you to go into it with like crazy expectations and then not get much out of it, because how I did it was I did not know much about the book at all. I did not see the hype around it, and then I went into it, and I think that's one of the main reasons why I loved these books so much. So please don't go into it with like insane expectations or whatever, but I am obsessed with this book. If you want to spend your cozy winter time with a little bit of god of death and with a little bit of goddess of life and quite some amount of smut, and mix that with Greek mythology, the next series is the perfect one for you. It also has another book in it, so it's a total of 4 books, and it's so good. It's a story of the god of death and the goddess of life falling in love. The books are a touch of darkness, a touch of ruin, and a touch of malice. Persephone is dragged into hell by the god of the underworld, and that is what the story is. The only difference is that this has sort of like an urban fantasy setting where it still talks about the city life. It has phones in it, it has these weird city things in it, and urban fantasy is not my favorite, because when I'm reading fantasy, I want them to be writing letters and sending it via a pigeon, you know. So when I see phones in it, I'm like totally stumped. My brain cannot process it. I did not enjoy that aspect of it, but I know that urban fantasy is a very popular genre. So if you are okay with that, I think you'll enjoy these books a lot, because apart from that, I enjoy these books so much. They're smutty, they're so easy to read. Don't use your brain for these books, okay? It's not meant for that. It's not meant for you to dissect it. It's not meant for you to be like, so let's read between the lines. No, it's just meant for a freaking good time when you need it, when you want to switch off your brain and read some smart. Next, this gives me strong winter. I mean, I don't know why I'm saying that every time, because obviously it does. That's why it's in the video. This one I think is also set in winter time. So much of the book, I don't exactly remember it. A major chunk of the book is set in the winter time, and so it makes me want to read it during the winter. Plus it is a historical fantasy. Historical fantasy somehow just belongs to winter time for me, and I have no reasoning for it. It's just how my brain works. The book is The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by V.E. Schwab. This one is also a thickie, but it is only one book. It's a standalone fantasy book. It's a story of Addie LaRue, who has traded her life, and she has made a deal with the devil that she is going to be invisible for her entire life. Given that she's going to be alive for her entire life, she is never going to die because she wants to live her life. And then we see how that plays out. It also gives the backstory of how she came to make this deal with the devil and what happens later on. It's a memorable story. One of the other characters, that's Henry, is embedded in my mind. I love that man. I want to hug him. I want to take care of him. I love him so much. This is going to be a hit or miss for you, because it's so slow paced if you don't get connected with the characters, but it's so fast paced if you do, because you can't like stop reading. I think it is definitely worth a shot. Even if you are a beginner in the reading world, if you want to start with historical fantasy, I think you should go ahead with this one. Next up, we have the coziest book in the entire world. Not gonna talk much about this one too, because I have recommended it so many times, but this one actually made my winter a core memory. Last winter, you know how I said you remember a season of your life because of the books you read, because of the songs you listen to? This book reminds me of last winter. It's all fantasy and good company and coffee and just cozy vibes, and it's also a very short book to read. The book is Legends and Lattes by Travis Baldry, which is the story of Viv, who has left her past behind and now wants to open a coffee shop in a place that does not even know what coffee is. So you see all of these people discovering coffee and what happens with the coffee shop. It's a very short book. Don't get fooled by the size, because a lot of it is actually excerpt from the other book. Cozy redefined. I am obsessed with this book. I actually give it 5 stars. 6 stars, even if there's really not much happening. I just give it 6 stars because 1, it made my winter last winter. 2, it's a love letter to coffee lovers because I am obsessed with coffee. And 3, it made me realize how I need to romanticize my life and just slow down and live life. The next recommendation is a dingy and gloomy read. There is a darkness to the characters and there is a darkness to the plot line. There are some dark themes involved, but it is a standalone fantasy. There is also rivals to lovers romance, but it is subplot, and so much of it happens when it is dark and gloomy and very rainy, like wet outside, and so it gives me strong winter vibes. It's fantasy. Fantasy is always winter vibes, and I do wish I read this during the winter time. I'm just happy that I read it like in my AC during the night time, which just gave me winter vibes, but I was like, fake winter. You had the chance to read it in real winter. The book is A Study in Drowning by Ava Reed, which is the story of this girl who does not really have very high self-esteem. Given her friends and family, they suck. That there's no other way to put it. And she actually wanted to be an author, but women are not allowed to be in the literary world, and so she settles to be an architect. But then there is an opportunity to actually redesign her favorite author's house, and she takes it up. She becomes daring and she takes it up, and she goes over there only to discover a lot of things about this author and what happens when you meet your heroes. What if they're not actually heroes? The book is literally gorgeous. It's like one of my prized possessions, especially because I love this book so much. The highlight of the book for me was the character and also her not being allowed in the literary space and how that was reflected in a fantasy world in a very interesting way to read. But that doesn't have to be the highlight of your reading. It is a good time too. It becomes a little bit haunting towards the end, not in a paranormal way but in a fantastical way. One of my 6-star reads for the entire year, which seems peak winter to me because I think it starts in winter time. The first scene is set in winter time and then a lot of things take place during the winter and it's just so cozy to read. But this also is very fast paced. There is so much plot going on. The characters are so interesting. It's a book about books. There's just so much good about this book and it is a standalone right now, but I wish to God, like I beg the author, who is not going to watch this video at all, but like the author, the publisher, somebody, whoever is watching this video, make it a series. I'm here for it because it can turn into a series if the author wants to turn it into a series. The book is The Book of Doors by Gareth Brown, which yet again is one of my prized possessions. It's the story of the Book of Doors. Our main character gets it from this old man, and when you have this book, any door is every door. You can travel wherever you want to travel, but so many people are actually behind getting this Book of Doors for themselves, and you see the journey of what happens after that. That is the thriller aspect of it. The Book of Doors is the fantasy aspect of it, and our characters are literally delectable. I am obsessed with these characters. I think I should reread this in the winter time and annotate it. I have underlined a few things in this book already because they were so memorable for me, but I think I should properly annotate it. It's that good. It's awesome. It's perfect for your winter time. If there is one book you will pick up, it should be this book. I'm obsessed with this book. In the end, we have a cute little fantasy book which won't even take a lot of your time, and I recently talked about it in my, I think, latest video, but it gives such strong winter vibes. The book is The House That Spoke by Zuni Chopra, which is a story of Zoon, who as she turns 15 comes to know that her house talks, but only to her and nobody else can listen to it, and she goes on an adventure after that. There are so many other things that happen, but this is the concept of the book. It's very short to read and it's also great for teenagers, great for beginners, and it's also told from the perspective of a teenager. So if you're like really young, if you're like 11 or 12, even then you can go ahead and read this book or give it to your children. If they're 11 or 12, they'll have a good time. There's this beautiful quote. This is exactly why this is such a winter book that I have highlighted, and I did not know that I actually highlighted things in it. But the fresh autumn morning was just beginning to bloom. It seemed as though the sky had slept in and slept well and was thoroughly happy about it. Beautiful, very cozy winter vibe. In the end, before we go to my TBR, we have books from historical literary Japanese fiction. First and foremost is my latest read, which is The Lantern of Lost Memories by Sanaka Hiragi, which is a story of how when you die, you go to this place where you wake up with all of the photos of your life, and you pick out the photos that whichever you want, just put into this magical lantern, and then your entire life flashes before you move on. Yet another short read, and it's Japanese fiction. It is translated by Jessie Kirkwood and it's translated well. Starts out super duper cozy, but as you move forward into the book, it becomes so good, and it has memorable characters, it has emotional depth to it. So if you want to start with Japanese fiction this winter, this is your book. Next up, we have two historical fictions from one author because both of them give me strong winter vibes because how much they're set in the winter time. First up, we have The Four Winds. Now this book is about the dust bowl phenomenon and how a family survives it, but winter time is a very deep and unsettling time for this family and everybody that lives at that time, because during the winters the resources are reduced to nothing and they have to survive it. And so I think it's very fun to read during the winter time if you want to start with historical fictions. If you want to cry your eyes out, if the sad and gloomy is your vibe, then this is the perfect book for you. This is my favorite book. It's slow paced. It makes you really slow down and read, and I love when books do that for me because I'm usually so hyper. And the other book is The Nightingale by Kristen Hanna, which is a story of two sisters set during World War II. Yet again, so much of it is set in wintertime, and even if it isn't, it's a sad, gloomy book with an empowering story. Two empowering stories of both the sisters. Next up, we have A Man Called Avi by Frederick Bachman, which is the story of Avi, who has recently lost his wife and he gets new neighbors recently, and we see the shift in his life, and we also dive into his past, what happens with his wife. It's a fairly short book to read during the winter, but I think that it's a very nice book to cozy up with, and yet again shed a few tears here and there. This just gives such cozy vibes because of Avi, because of how cozy, like, he's grumpy, okay, but reading about him is such a cozy experience. And so I think this is a good book to read during the winters. If you're a beginner, if you're a teenager, go ahead, read this book. Next up, I have a YA college romance recommendation for my teenagers and my beginners out there. This one also has a strong philosophical not strong, but sort of like a philosophical point to it. It's emotional, there are so many characters, and the entire setting is very, very winter, very cozy up, and just drink your coffee and read this book. The book is Begin Again by Emma Lord. I would put it in the romance pile, but it's just not that heavy on the romance. It's sort of like a subplot. It's heavier on the life of all of these characters. Andy is our main character, and we do follow her life, but we also follow the lives of so many of her friends, and not in a boring way at all, because look, the book is not that thick. It's very airtight and it does not waste any time at all. It is not repetitive at all. It's just a very good and cozy time. In the end, we have a staple classic that you need to read during the winters. It's peak winter classic reading, and the book is Little Women by Louisa May Alcott. Their father is on the border fighting for the country, and we follow the story of these little women. Just get your hot chocolate and read this classic. Even if you have never read classics before, you can start with this one because it's not very hard to read. It has so much plot going on, even if I am saying that it's just the story of these characters, and it is characters oriented, but there's just so much plot going on, which is a very rare thing in the classic books that I have read, which makes it perfect for beginners. And if you are a teenager and you go to school and you're done with classic reading because you're like, these teachers just keep giving me classic books to read, but I really don't want to, I think you should read this book once, you know, sort of read it for pleasure and shift your perspective that classic reading or reading in itself does not have to be a pressurizing thing. With that, we come towards the end of the book recommendations part of it. Now let's get to my TBR. My winter TBR is not only the books that I'm going to read by December or by the end of the year. It's not my end of the year TBR. It is all of the books that I want to read by, say, like March, because till then is what I think, like till when winter goes on in my mind. So from now, like mid-October to March, I want to read these books because they give me strong winter vibes, and I have also been saving up some of these books for winter. Starting with the series, we have The Dance of Thieves and The Vow of Thieves by Mary E. Pearson. I have these books since so long, and I think that I also put it on my winter TBR last year, but I never got to it. But I'm very determined to actually get to it this year, because so many times during this year I thought that I really want to read this book, and I read around 30 pages and it gave me strong Wrath and Dawn vibe, because Wrath and Dawn is my favorite duology, and this gave me similar vibes. I was like, I'm gonna have the same experience again during the winter, which is why this is now on my winter TBR. This is also, I think, supposed to be enemies to lovers and peak enemies to lovers, and I have not read a good enemies to lovers romance since a long time this year. Next up, we have another series, which is the Bear and the Nightingale series. Now I am showing you this book because this literally has winter in the title, okay, and I think this is the first book, and look at the second, I think this is the second book. Look at that. It's all so wintry and cozy, and I think it's also told from the perspective of a teenager, and it's a little bit like this book I read, which is called Girl with the Dragon, something like that, and I loved that book so much. So I think that this is going to give me cozy winter vibes while it's going to be a magical story set from the perspective of a teenager or of a child, and that is awesome to me. Another series that I want to get to this winter time is the Percy Jackson series. I actually started reading this book, but I again pushed it off so I could read it during the winter time. I read Harry Potter. I think Harry Potter is also peak winter time read, but because I have already read Harry Potter, I decided that I will read Percy Jackson this winter time and also vlog it, hopefully. Because it is Greek mythology, it is a long series, and I also do have other books from this series which are like thick ones, and I'm so excited to invest myself into it and probably remember my winter season through the Percy Jackson series. Next up, I have two classics that I have put on my TBR, and they both give me winter vibes. The first one is Wuthering Heights by Emily Bronte. I want to start reading more classics, but the classics that I have read till now, most of them is almost like no plot, only vibes. And if I want to start reading more classics, I think I would be more interested in the story if it had some love in it. And I think Wuthering Heights is this really popular love story. I don't know much about it, so don't come at me for that. I'm sorry if I'm making any mistake. I think that the romance in this is going to help me to stick to it and actually finish this, even if it is classic, and sort of shift my own perspective that classics don't need to be scary. And secondly, I want to read How to Kill a Mockingbird by Harper Lee. I have been wanting to read this since I read about it in this book called The Reading List, because this is one of the books in the reading list, and I wanted to read all the books that is there in the reading list. Since then, I want to read this because of the effect it had on the characters of that book. Plus, it is a classic. Plus, it is such a short book. It's a tiny book. I have been looking for it since so long to get this copy of it, but I was getting it for like $4.99 or $3.99 in Crossword, and so I did not buy it. But recently somebody on Instagram was actually selling this book, Aman, and he sold it for I think 200 or less than that, so I just grabbed it, and it's in really good condition too, so I feel like I got a steal. Up, I have The Little Coffee Shop of Kabul, which is one little cafe and 5 extraordinary women. I think that this will be a mix of 1,000 splendid suns, so it will have like a little bit of sadness to it, but not completely traumatic. I think it will also be cozy because it also has a cafe in it, so it will have the legends and lattes vibe to it. So I'm trying to mix up two vibes, legends and lattes and 1,000 splendid suns, and they don't go well together at all, but I think somehow this book will be able to do it. And also look at the cover, how winter is that cover. I am so excited to read this book this year. Next up, I have The Things We Leave Unfinished by Rebecca Yarros, who is the author of the Fourth Wing series. I absolutely have no other reason except that I look at the cover and I feel like I need to read this during the winter time. I also feel like because it is, I think, a historical romance book, I think any sort of historical book hits different during winter time, but especially historical romances, to cozy up in my bed and read it, it's going to be a lot of fun. And I'm hoping that it makes me shed a few tears, because I've seen people say that this book is completely heartbreaking. Next up, I have All the Lovers in the Night by Mieko Kawakami, which is translated by Sam Bett and David Boyd. This one is a very short read, and that is one of the reasons why I have put it on my TBR, but also because I have read Miss I Sandwich and Breasts and Eggs by the same author, and I am obsessed with both those books, and I have seen a lot of people say that this is their favorite work by this author, and I'm just like, is this going to be my favorite too? Like, is it going to hit me harder than the other two books? And I really want to read it for that. Also, I don't know why, it gives me the vibe of two people during midnight just walking alone in the street holding hands. Every time I look at the book, that is the vibe I get. I don't know what the book is about, but I feel like it'll be like that, and it will be like conversations that these two people have, and I will get those vibes, though I don't know what the story will be. So I'm very excited to read this and explore it, and because it is so short, it won't even take much of my time, so I'm excited to read this one. Next up, I recommended you guys to read A Man Called Avi because it's a story of a grumpy man grumpy old man, but it gives strong cozy winter vibes. I also want that feeling for myself, but I have already read A Man Called Avi, and so I am reading The 100-Year-Old Man Who Climbed Out of the Window and Disappeared by Jonas Jonasson, which is also a movie right now. Yet again, I do not know what the book is about, but I think it is about a 100-year-old man who jumps out of the window and disappears, and I want to read his story. Like, is it going to be adventurous? Is this old man grumpy? If he is jumping out of the window, he has to be something like that. And I love reading stories of old people so much because they are wise sometimes, and like they have lived life and they have this vibe to them that who cares? You know, they have like, who cares? They don't care about what other people are gonna say. They just do whatever they want to do, and it's so much fun to read. So I'm excited to read this and get the Up or the A Man Called Avi vibes from this one. I also recommended you a cozy mystery book, which is Finlay Donovan, and I've already read it, but I did want a cozy mystery for myself, and the one I'm reading is Vera Wong's Unsolicited Advice for Murderers by Jessie Sutanto. I have been wanting to read this book since like 2 years at this point, but I just did not get to it. This winter time, when I feel like reading a thriller book, I'm gonna read this one, a cozy thriller. I recommended Legends and Lattes to you guys, and I'm only highlighting this because I wanted to see just how similar my reading list is to you guys, like when I'm recommending these books to you, because I literally want to read similar books for myself. I have read Legends and Lattes, so the book I'm going to read is Bookshops and Bondas by Travis Baldry, which is the story of Viv only, but this is a prequel to Viv's story, and this is a love letter to books and bookshops, and I'm so excited to read this. I have this book since so long, and I'm waiting for winters so I can read this book. I recommended a horror book to you guys. I want to read more horror books this winter season because that was my first horror novel and it has completely changed my life. I actually really want to start reading a lot more horror novels, and the one that I already have that I want to read is The Book of Accidents by Chuck Wending. I got this because it is a horror novel, and because of the cover it looks sinister and it gives me Stranger Things vibes. I was not reading it till now because it is so thick. I was waiting for winters and I did not know if I'm actually going to enjoy the horror genre, but now that I have read one book already and it was short and I got through it so quickly, I feel more confident, and so now I'm gonna read this one. Next, for the cozy fantasy winter vibes, I'm going to be reading Emily Weir's Encyclopedia of Fairies by Heather Fawcett. I tried reading this book last year when I was in Goa, but I was not able to get through it fully, and I think one of the reasons was because I was at a beach and it was a very summery setting, and this gives me strong winter vibes, so I think I'm going to read it during the winter. It's a standalone fantasy. I think it does have a second part to it, but I think you can also read it as a standalone, and this is going to be my standalone for the year. Another romance book I want to read is Lovelight Farms by B.K. Borison, and I have the other 3 books in this series, so I am not actually going to commit to the entire series right now because that's just a lot, but I know for a fact that during winters or during any point in my life, actually sometimes I just want to cozy up with a rom-com, and I've seen people say that you can actually invest yourself into this series emotionally too. It's an emotional romance and I love that. So I do have the 4 books, which I'm very happy about. Whenever I need intervals between all of the other books, gonna read these books. I recommended you guys a vampire book, didn't I? Reading about vampires during winters is very important, okay? I recently got done watching the entire Twilight series. Should I put the Twilight series on my TBR? I've never read the books. I've watched the movies, but I've never read the book. I'm gonna get my dose of vampires from Crave by Tracy Wolf, which I actually got last year. I remember I cribbed about these pages when I got it last year, and so many of you commented saying there's actually deckled pages and I don't have to worry about it. So thank you for telling me that. This is actually the first book in a series, and the natural Anchal in me actually wants to get the entire series at once, but I'm not going to do that because it's a 6 books long series and it's quite expensive, especially when you get the hardcover version of it, and I am going to get the hardcover version because just look at that, it's just so good. This book is said to have vampires in it, and I don't know what it's about, but that is enough for me to know and actually read this book. I like it, then I'm going to go ahead and buy other books. Next up is another classic with very gloomy vibes, and I'm waiting yet again the entire year to read this book. I keep thinking of picking it up, but I'm like, no, just wait for the winter. I think it's gonna hit different. The book is The Bell Jar by Sylvia Plath. I also have such, I'm sorry about that. I also have such a beautiful edition of it. Look at the end pages. I think this relates to the fic theory, which I know nothing about. I want to know. I think you have to be in the right headspace to read this book, even like with your mental health, and I am in the best space during winter time, and so I'm excited to read this one and just see what all the fuss is about. Is it actually that scary or not? Not in a paranormal way, but you know. Next up, I wanted to read another book by Fredrik Backman. Plus, this book is set in a very cold place. Like, I think it's a Swedish town. The book is Bear Town by Fredrik Backman. Literally, look at the cover. I mean, duh. When else am I gonna read it? When it's all sunny outside? So I'm gonna sit in the park and read this book? No. So I saved it. Give me more vampires during the winter time. I read My Roommate as a Vampire last year, and I had so much fun with it. It was just like such a fun book. And this year, because I have read that already, I do want to read the other book that the author has come out with. But apart from that, I want to read My Boyfriend is a Vampire by Eva Knight. I started reading this last year itself, but I had already had my fun with My Roommate is a Vampire, so I did not get into it. But this year, I think I'm gonna read this one. Next up, I have three books that is on the TBR because I have been waiting all year to make this video. I want to start my journey of reading dark academia books, and I actually want to dress like that too, but you can't really dress. I mean, this is literally dark. This screams dark academia to me. This sweatshirt screams dark academia. I think winter time is the perfect time to wear it. So I want to wear those clothes. I want to read these books. I want to get into the vibe. And so I've put these books on my TBR. First up, we have The Secret History by Donna Tartt. And secondly, we have Ninth House by Leigh Bardugo. Thirdly, we have Babel by R.F. Kuang, but I don't know where my copy is actually. So I'm going to cozy up, get into the dark academia vibe and read these books then. In the end, I have already recommended one book to you guys by Ava Reid, and I loved A Study in Drowning so much, so I wanted to put another book on my TBR by Ava Reid, and that is Lady Macbeth. I think it's a witchy story, death touched, poison eyed, witch kissed, and oh my god, strong winter vibes. The text inside is so big. The book is so short, so I'm very excited to get to it this winter time. And with that, we come towards the end of the video. Oh my god, I'm exhausted. I think this video is going to be like an hour long, so I'm sorry about that, but I have put timestamps in case you were getting bored. I really hope you enjoyed it. I'm actually totally exhausted, but you guys know I love you more than you know. I'll see you guys again very soon. If you want this, link in description.